Hi everyone, hope you're all doing okay. It's been a short while since I posted my first video. Unfortunately, I've been having these chest pains and breathing difficulties in the middle of the night, each night. So getting this second video up and running has taken me a bit longer than I thought. But speaking of which, at the end of my first video, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about the stigma of having cystic fibrosis from an Asian perspective. But the other day, I was browsing through the CF Trust website, and I came across a link giving advice to CF sufferers around employment. About what to do when working or looking for a job. And this triggered something very sensitive inside me. And I really wanted to get this out and share with you. So what I want to do is a course correction for this video, and instead talk to you about my story around trying to earn a living with cystic fibrosis. It does tie in a way with the social and emotional side of CF, which is why I also want to talk about it. So quickly, just to recap from my last video, I was 23 when I was diagnosed with CF. My father had by then passed away. And I had lost my place at university because of my health. So I had to move into full-time employment because I had to take over running the family home, paying the bills, etc., and also look after my mother. Now, my first full-time interview was with an IT company for an order management position. And I was interviewed by a lady called Sophia. And I remember distinctly one aspect of that interview. I had to fill in a questionnaire, and one of the questions was multiple choice. How would you rate your health? And I remember getting nervous at this point because I couldn't circle good. I wasn't going to circle bad, so I circled fair. Which did prompt some more probing. I explained about having cystic fibrosis and requiring nebulizer treatment. Apparently it was discussed internally with one of the directors, but fast forwarding, Sophia gave me the job. To which, after looking back on everything that's happened to me, I am eternally grateful. She gave me my first breakthrough in IT, and if Sophia is watching, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. So I worked my socks off in this role, and I pushed forward as hard as I could, just like any other employee. I would quite easily come into the office at 8 in the morning and leave at 6:30 p.m. every day. And I really enjoyed it. I still had to do my nebulizer treatment, which I did from my car. I still had to attend hospital appointments, but that wasn't a problem. And the company just let me get on with it. And as I progressed and I got promoted, I did win a couple of awards. So just wanted to show you a photo right now as an example. This is me with Will Carling, the former England rugby union captain. He was a guest presenter and he handed me an award. Now, my intention here is not to brag, but there is a reason why I'm telling you this, and it'll become apparent shortly. Now, it also helped me tremendously working alongside people who didn't treat me differently. Now, bearing in mind, after my CF diagnosis, I felt very isolated. But I made a few really good friends at work who taught me a lot about the business. As an example, just showing you another photo of one of my friendships from work that has stood the test of time. This is me next to Rob, who I learned shed loads from. He knew about my CF, and it didn't affect him at all. He still taught me. We became friends along the way, and 19 years later, we're still in contact through the magic of social media. I also had very kind, very human managers. Sophia was the first, as you know. Another I had was Michelle. Michelle looked out for me a lot, and mainly because she had a kind soul. She cared, and in fact, Michelle accompanied me last year to a PALS meeting with my hospital to provide me with support, even though we don't work together anymore. Now, I was, full steam ahead for the first 7 years. I worked with the company. I was active. I was doing my nebulizer treatment. I was taking medication and appointments. I was socializing at work parties when I could. And I got promoted twice to the role I'm currently doing right now, which is a technical pre-sales role. However, in 2008, so 7 years after I started working, cystic fibrosis well and truly knocked me down, and I did not see it coming. A lot of things in my life changed as a result of CF, and it also provided my first sight of perhaps a strain on my working relationship with my employer. So I just turned 30, and that year was the first time I had been admitted into hospital for IV antibiotics. I had a major fungal infection in my lungs, and I found it hard to breathe. It felt like I had rocks in my chest. And I also had my first bout of pancreatitis, which is horrid, and that's putting it mildly. The end result was that I was off sick from work for maybe more than a month. But before then, I had a relatively good attendance record. My daily treatment plan had also changed. I had to start taking enzymes with my food because the pancreas had stopped producing those enzymes which help break down and digest food. I also ended up with cystic fibrosis related diabetes, which is probably closer to a type 1 classification because I'm insulin dependent. All this because my pancreas had stopped working and stopped producing insulin. So the net effect out of all of this was that I was completely floored. I mean, my energy levels had completely tanked. Walking around was difficult, getting out of breath quite easily, even going for a shower or getting changed, I was so breathless. I had a new physiotherapy and nebulizer regime from the hospital. I mean, things had completely changed, which meant I had to start working from home. And perhaps in my mind, this is where the problem started. Now, by this time, I was under a different management structure, but there was a perceived lack of humanity and compassion, not from my direct managers, but from above. I mean, there was a resounding, "We don't have a work from home policy, tough." And that was said without any hint of considering what I deemed were exceptional circumstances beyond my control. HR had organised a return to work assessment, which involved an independent medical assessor coming to my home and asking me questions. Now, all I could think of at that point was someone who doesn't have a Scooby-Doo about cystic fibrosis was coming to my home and asked questions and put a report together. So I started to panic because I felt up against it. I was thinking, what if my employer gives me an ultimatum? I just didn't know what was going to happen. Now, it just so happened around that time that the government had changed the law and broadened the definition of the term disability to include long-term and chronic diseases like cystic fibrosis. Now, I'm not one to shout from the rooftop that I have a disability, but that was the law. I had a social worker from the Brompton Hospital who helped me complete some paperwork. And then shortly after, I was registered as disabled. In addition, the hospital wrote a supporting letter to the company explaining my medical position, what was required and why I couldn't return to the office, which was great. Don't get me wrong, it was great to have the hospital support. But the whole affair felt quite bitter. I wasn't necessarily looking for any favors from my company, but I was hoping that the previous 7 years that I'd ably given, demonstrated my value, and it was purely for health reasons that my circumstances had changed. And it was going through that motion that made me realize that humanity was lacking. But nonetheless, I carried on. I just, punched through for the next 5 years. I came into the office when I could, but it was business as usual. It was interesting, though, for me to hear that the company understood what I contributed to the business when I was off sick during that extended period of time. So obviously I was doing something right. Fast forwarding to February 2013, again, everything changed, but I'm not exaggerating, it was a shocker. This company that I'd worked for so long had gone into administration, and nearly 1,100 of us lost our jobs. And I remember seeing on my BlackBerry that night emails saying that we need to look out for each other. And that sentiment hit me for the wrong reasons. And let me explain. Now, IT is a global phenomenon. It's everywhere. But it's also an incredibly small world. And by that, I mean there can be very few degrees of separation between people who know each other in IT. What I found out the hard way was that I was more recognized for my health issues than my ability to do the job. Now, with me being out of a job, like all the others, I hit LinkedIn, I updated my CV, and I started to reach out to my contacts. But for me, there was more radio silence. Everyone I knew were pretty much landing a new job relatively quickly, but I was still struggling. One day I met up with a former colleague who was working at a company that was heavily recruiting. And at the end of the conversation, I'm smiling now, but I wasn't then, I promise you. He lowered his voice and he said to me, "I'm not sure if we have a policy to recruit someone like you." Now, in hindsight, I should have pushed back and asked, "What do you mean, someone like you?" But I guess I was just taken aback and I didn't say anything. On another occasion, I saw on LinkedIn a vacancy at another company where another ex-colleague was working. And on paper, I ticked all the boxes. The job spec was exactly what I had done for the previous 8 years. I had a chat with this ex-colleague who put me in touch with the recruiter. I had a chat with him, and when I was discussing my disability, He came back to me with this response, and I can't forget it. He said, "It's not in the company's culture to recruit someone like me." Now, I was getting desperate for a job. I was nearly unemployed for nearly 2 years. Sorry, 2 years? 2 months. 2 months. So without really thinking about the implications on my health, I said that I'd put all my medical equipment into my car. And when necessary, I'll do my physiotherapy, my injections, my nebulizer treatment, all in the car. To which the recruiter said, "Well, what's changed?" And all this told me that there was so much ignorance and clear lack of understanding and, just basic humanity. It was a bit frightening. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but what both the recruiter and their ex-colleague had said to me was illegal. And that was according to the Department of Work and Pensions. I was never given an opportunity to discuss my abilities, my skill sets, and what I could contribute to the business. And it suddenly became incredibly lonely again, much like when I was diagnosed with CF. And I felt really stupid, to be honest. Like what I'd achieved in the last 12 years meant nothing because all people could see was my health. And then it hit me that I needed to apply to a company where no one knew me and rebuild my reputation. So I took some additional time out to have a fundoplication surgery, which was always on the cards before the collapse. By that time, it was nearly 5 months being out of a job. I started to pray and pray hard. One of my friends had a contact at a company called Dell EMC, and I sent in my CV to that contact. Maybe a month later, I got a phone call from one of the recruiters at Dell offering me an interview. The benefits agency advised me that I wasn't required to disclose my disability until after and if I received an offer. So I proceeded to have 3 interviews at Dell EMC. And the line of questioning was all around my experience and a test of my soft skills. And every day after each round of interview, I prayed for a result. And one day I was driving to a dental appointment and the Dell recruiter phoned me saying that they were trying to organize a 4th interview, but they decided to dispense with that and go straight to offer. If you'd seen my first video, you may have gauged that I don't have a lot of happy moments in my life. But I can tell you this, that phone call from Dell EMC was one of them. And I think either God was smiling down at me or my father had asked God to give me a break. I like to think it was both. My next hurdle was mulling over how do I tell the Dell recruiter about my cystic fibrosis. When I told him, he said it wasn't an issue and that I should discuss it with my new manager. But more importantly, when could I start? And I was like, what the heck just happened? I've been with Dell EMC now for 7 years. Everyone I work with, all the managers I've had are reminiscent of the people I knew when I first started in IT. Quite frankly, they behave as humans. Yes, there is a business to run, but they are compassionate, understanding, and incredibly patient. I still have hospital appointments to attend. I do work from home because I still have the same issues with my energy levels. Slightly going off topic, my mother now has evolving dementia, and that is another thing I have to juggle. I still have to maintain my daily medical treatment plan. And I just want to show you very quickly a quick slide of what a typical daily treatment regime looks like. I got this from one of the US websites. As you can see, it can take 2 to 3 hours a day, which for me is even more energy draining, particularly with the physiotherapy techniques that I've been taught. Since I started at Dell EMC, I've had at least 2 sinus surgeries, a few admissions for IV antibiotics, and I had my feeding tube put in a couple of years ago. But amongst all of this, I'm still given the opportunity to work, and the company still continues to support me. As you get older, cystic fibrosis does get harder to manage. I'm not going to make any bones about that. I would love to return to the office full time. I do miss out on the office banter and meeting people so much. I really miss that. But when I do try to get to the office, whether it's my local one or in Glasgow, I am left absolutely shattered by the end of the day. But I haven't given up hope. Before COVID, I wanted to try out this new apparatus that the hospital gave me that enables me to use my feeding tube in the office. Let me show you. So this is what I currently use. As you can see, it's quite big and cumbersome. You got your pump, you've got the feed, and you've got the connector, which I plug in into my port, if you will. But they gave me a shrunk down version, and this is the bottle of feed that gets strapped into there. You put the pump at the base, and the cherry on top of the icing of the cake is this little backpack that put the whole thing into there, and just have this connector plugged into me, and away I go. Now, I don't know if I'll ever get the chance to use this in the office because of COVID, but either way, I would really love to be amongst my colleagues again. But the way I work every day is that I try to be as visible as I can, which is difficult when you're on your own at home and everyone else is in the office. I keep the lines of communication to my manager as open as possible, so there are no surprises. My situation is compounded by being a primary carer for my elderly mother, but I make no bones about it. I'm extremely lucky and grateful that I landed at Dell EMC. What basically saved me was Dell's equal opportunity policy. They don't judge, they don't discriminate, and because of that, I'm able to work, express myself, and contribute to the business. And you know what? That's all I ever wanted. A few years ago, I actually bumped into that ex-colleague who said that there wasn't a policy to recruit someone like me. And when I told him that I was working at Dell, he said to me, and I'm going to try and capture his tone of voice as well. He said, "Really? Dell hired you?" I'm not going to lie to you, I wanted to deck him. I mean, that would have been illegal, I know. So I walked away and spoilt myself with a mint chocolate chip ice cream on a cone. I've also made, some really good supportive friends at Dell EMC. I can't tell you the number of times that the company has gone above and beyond for me. Even when I'm admitted into hospital, they come and visit me. Here is a photo from an admission a couple of years ago. These guys were in town and they managed to squeeze me in between visits. They didn't have to. They came because they have a good soul and they care. And I'm very grateful to them. And I'm grateful to all my managers I've worked under and with HR. And if I could, I would say to Michael Dell, thank you for building your company and establishing your equal opportunities policy. Now, in my opinion, the disabled community is an untapped resource of talent and deserves every chance to work. I don't know how things in the world have progressed in the last 7 years with regards to recruitment policies. I still see comments today in CF groups on social media, people asking what the policy is if they want to find work and what should or shouldn't they say. I am hopeful that things have improved. I know that more awareness is being raised around things like mental health, which is awesome. It just means that for me, humanity is being brought back into play. Incidentally, I am slightly labouring the point about compassion and empathy on purpose as another spoiler alert for the next video on stigma with cystic fibrosis. So just to round off, trying to work whilst managing cystic fibrosis is challenging. To be compliant with physiotherapy, medications, diabetes monitoring, nutrition, exercise, along with earning a living is not easy. But one thing that CF patients are is that we are relentless. We do drive forward, and that shows character. That shows our character. It is hard enough having to fight a disease on a daily basis, let alone fight ignorance. And I hope that the world is improving on that front. So that's it, guys. That's my story on earning a living with cystic fibrosis. If you're still with me at the end of this video, thank you so much for listening. And I will see you again soon with my next video. Take care.